Boom, we're here. So we have Jose Leal and Garry Turner, and which we're going to just talk for a half hour. And Garry has a very interesting approach to business and how it should be and stuff like that. Um, in particular, reimagining how the business runs. So, Garry, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Jose. Appreciate the invitation. So, yeah, radicality really, which is a very in tune with your platform.
Yeah.
It really is my attempt as somebody that works within the most harmful of sectors, within chemicals, within the extractive industries. It's my way of trying to invite those senior leaders, those major stakeholders in the old world that we're seeing collapse, to get them to try and really step into reimagining for themselves and also their businesses. What could more generative, inclusive, less harmful business look and feel like? And really, that's what the radicality ecosystem is all about, is trying to bring together a range of transformational partners to help hold space, to help coach, guide, and create safe and brave spaces for people to imagine for themselves.
Garry, you just mentioned collapse.
Yeah, same.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
I was wondering. We see it. Do they see it?
It's a beautiful question, Jose. I would say I'd flip the question a little bit, and not just so let me answer the question.
Okay, so it wasn't so beautiful after all.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's really intriguing, right, is that they are, again, back to the thing about feeling. And before we went live, we were speaking about sometimes we can't always communicate what we're trying to say with words. And what I'm seeing, particularly within the extractive industries, and I've been there, I've done a lot of inner work the last decade, but I can see people that know something's not right, and it's probably happening below the neck, in their gut, in their heart, somewhere else in their body, but they suppress it in favor of going after the number, going after the next M&A acquisition, going after all the stuff they've been told is the way to do this. So I don't think they're actually unaware, Jose. I don't think they're ready to reckon with the head, heart, gut conversation that needs to be had.
They're not conscious of it, but it's there.
Yes, I would say that's a fair summary.
Well, and that's very close to what we say about radical, that people know there's something wrong, but they don't, they go for the money, basically. So you said you had a lot of experience with the industry. What have you done?
Yeah, so actually, I'm a little bit of a double agent, actually. So whilst I'm building radicality, I actually still work within a $4.5 billion turnover chemical company. So I'm actually inside of the belly of the beast whilst trying to disrupt it. So I'm basically trying to disrupt it from the inside and from the outside. Okay. Yeah. And that gives me a very unique perspective as someone that understands transforming of humans, understands where we are and where we think we may be going. So I'm sort of a bit of almost like a bridge builder in a way, and part of my role, and I'm not honed this yet, because it's about words, is, what are the words that we need to help people step into more discomfort, into that uncomfortable space, which is real growth, real transformation. Right. And I think that's what you're working on at Radical World, is what I'm working on in radicality, is just this, what are the words, what are the experiences people need to have to let them drop those masks of fear or that invulnerability, that ego, etc.
Yeah. We think that businesses, traditional business of today, are business hustle. In other words, they want everything fixed. They don't want anything to change because they wouldn't know what to do. But and that's business hustle. I mean, the great thing about Ford, there are a lot of bad things, but the great thing about Ford is that he had this other way of doing things, which was very different than the way it was before, and it made a huge company. So I think we're going to do more honest to goodness business with change than trying to avoid change, trying to suppress that.
But I think that at the same time, that change that you just mentioned it's a very different kind of business, right? It's not the same let's go get the numbers kind of business, right?
Yeah,
So
it's different. It's different.
we might grow in different ways. We might, and we've had these conversations many times, and with people like yourself, Garry, where the question is sort of, we talk about reimagining. Are we reimagining all of work, or are we reimagining business? Because there's a difference between these two things.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, it's what a beautifully put question. Now, I'd probably go even further. We are looking at, so we come back to the point of collapse, right? We've only got to look at global supply chains I'm part of day in, day out. Getting food onto our tables has become a lot harder. Getting material within 40 days doesn't happen anymore. It's now 80 days to get material shipped across the ocean.
Wow.
So we're looking at full systems collapse. We're not just talking about business falling down. We've got to remember as well, and I've got to honor someone in my network called Heather Luna, who does a lot of work around supremacy culture patterns for those that are interested to go there. She said the global south have been under collapse for 600 years. And when we think about that, it really puts it in sharp perspective that actually we're only now starting to feel this acutely in our supply chains, in our workplaces, in our bodies. Whereas, the global south have been experiencing this for 500 years. So we're at a real liminal space, but an opportunity as well, a real opportunity to reimagine and go, right, what does healthy, generative, inclusive look and feel like? And it doesn't look like hitting the next quarter's numbers. Right. It looks like making sure that we're doing things for the world, for work, but also for our communities. And we're making sure we're reducing harm in our supply chains. It's a really big macro topic, but actually we can all play a part in it from where we're sitting right here in the moment. And I think there's been a lot of, I call it learnt helplessness over the years. We've been told you should do it this way, or if you don't do it, this will happen to you, rather than actually, what do you think? What's possible for you from where you stand in this very moment? And that's the really generative potential I see.
And from the perspective of that opportunity to grow, we have built an educational system and a system of work that not only makes us feel that we don't have the autonomy to do anything, but then reinforces it by whenever we stick our heads up, we get it slapped, right? So really, it's a really fundamental change that we're talking about here, because if we're back to how we're educated, this isn't just a change in how we work.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant, Matt.
Oh, number one, number two, going to the bathroom. Yeah. No, because here's something very physical and very much you feel in your body. Instead of saying, excuse me, and going out the door, you have to ask for permission. Can I go number one, or should I pee in my pants? And one of my sons was made to pee in his pants. And that's why I'm son of a bitch. No, but is the teacher deciding for you that you have to pee? How absurd is that? So the educational system is a big part of that.
So Garry, how do you reimagine this? Not what it will be, because I think most of us, whether we have drawings like you do about what this looks like or not, most of us who have been thinking about this for some time, we have a sense of where it needs to be, of where the delta is between where we are and where it needs to be. We have that sense, but we don't always know how the heck do we get there. And so what do you see as that reimagining? What's that transition look like for you?
I can give you a very practical example for you and your community this evening. So I ran an experiment without asking for permission literally 10 days ago. And that permission was to get 2 colleagues, one Muslim colleague, one white woman, into a space, co-created, facilitated space to go, right, why is X organization silent on what's happening in Israel, Gaza? But they were very quick to respond to Russia, Ukraine. What's going on in the thought process? What's happening? Again, no judgment, no shame, just to say, hey, like, what's going on within the leadership psyche? And we had a beautiful 45-minute exploration with a load of data that came out of that conversation, which I'm now going to hand to the CEO of a company on Monday. That's one really real, back to one of the things to discuss this evening, today, that's stepping into that discomfort. That instead of, I could have, which I would have done a decade ago, have gone, yeah, but if I do that, who am I upset? And if I hand this to the CEO, how many lines of management are going to be pissed off with me? You know, instead of that, it was just like, no, this is the right thing to do because I know clearly this is not sustainable. So to answer your question, Jose, every one of us can do what I just described. Nothing is stopping us from within our context. Grab 2 people, 3 people, 20 people, have the conversations around what we're all seeing from different contexts and experiences, build the energy around that, do more experiments. You know, it's really that network effect. But I really see these changes. It's going to be bottom up and side in. It's not going to come top down.
Right.
And so let's assume that you do that. My suspicion is that what you've just described is kind of what's happening in the UK right now. Not in work, but in society at large. Where people are saying, okay, I'm not happy with these things, and I'm going to start raise some ruckus. And we're seeing it here politically, right, in the United States. So
can you say more about the situation in the UK? I'm not aware of.
Well, there's been some unrest, right? And that unrest is coming from the population, just people on the streets that are unhappy with the status quo. And lots of it has to do with immigration, lots of it has to do with the state of the economy and all of this kind of stuff, right? And I'm not an expert in that, but it seems to me that whenever you see unrest, it's because people are not comfortable in the situation that they're in, right? That some needs are not being met. And so I wonder if we kind of say to people, hey, go do what needs to be done, rather than doing what is expected of you by the system, what does that do to a large corporation?
It's a really good question. I would assert from the conversations I've had so far since running this experiment, there's not actually, in my opinion, and I see it within my context, Jose, people aren't actually sitting around wanting to blow up the system. There's some people that do want to literally go anarchy, go use the nuclear button on business. I'm not one of those people. When I talk about radicality, I'm talking about radically reimagining how we show up, challenging our fears, coming from a place of connection, celebrating difference, leaning into discomfort, everything that education system you spoke about, counter to all of that. Now, there's 2 things I would describe. So what you described around the unrest in the UK, that actually, just for context for Matt and for any of your US listeners in particular, the unrest was actually, that came about because 3 young girls were sadly murdered up in the northwest of England in the UK. But a certain group of people spread a message that was actually a Muslim person that murdered the 3 girls. But it wasn't. It was complete fake news. Internet took off, and then suddenly we were into riots. So why I wanted to give that framing is, I see that what I'm trying to do and what we're all trying to do here on this call is to bring people together to reimagine, to push and poke against the current system and co-create. What the other example is fear-based anarchy and retaliation because they don't feel they're being invested in, don't feel there's job opportunities, don't feel seen or heard. So it's really important, this nuance, right? You can be radical in many different ways. But I think what we're all speaking about on this call is, how can we radically reimagine and challenge the status quo but take everyone with us because we can all see something better at the other end.
But by the way, what we mean by radical is going to the roots. So it's not radical, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to hang you,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But what is the root of the problem? And one thing that we identified really early on is that we live in a system. A lot of people don't like that, but we live in the system. And the system called fiat. And we're thinking of radical as an alternative to fiat. I mean, fiat is going to be around for a long time. But there's got to be an alternative, because right now in the Valley here, when companies think of, well, I got to get funding and I got to get this, I got to get that, they're thinking the old model, the fiat model. And when I say, well, there's another model, it'll cost you less, it'll give you more control of everything that you got. And it's just an alternative, that's all. And what we hope to see is that grows and this shrinks, but that's a different story. So we're not talking about revolution or anything. We're talking about going to the roots of the problem, and we miss it a lot of times. I mean, like you said, we fall for fake news because we can go and ask anybody, what happened here? We take it from some guy in the basement somewhere saying, oh, this was a Muslim guy killing 3 girls. And, rather than talking. And we're starting from the educational system that Jose talked about. The system, once it's divided, William the Conqueror invented that. And he separated the rich from the poor. And but if it would have lasted 1,000 years, it would have ended up in the same place. So yeah, we got to get back together somehow.
Well, you mentioned Silicon Valley, and that reminds me of a story I read this morning. I don't know if, Garry, you're familiar with Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. He had an interview recently, and he was talking about the fact that in 10 years, most people will not be working for a company as an employee. That the transition, thanks to AI and the speed at which things are transforming, and his idea is that it's going to be more about becoming gig workers and doing multiple kinds of gig work for multiple companies. And to me, that is the scariest thing I could ever imagine, because we're talking about more power to the corporation and actually less power to the individual. And the idea of, between that and the getting a monthly stipend from the government as a fixed income, minimum income, those two ideas, the one from Reid Hoffman and that idea, to me are scary as heck, because that just puts us as at a point of no power at all. Because now, if we don't behave, guess what gets pulled away?
Right.
If we're not good little boys, what gets drawn out, right? So my question to you, Garry, is, seeing those two things as emergent kind of realities that are coming about, certainly some experimentation in both of those fronts, and at least here in the United States, gig work is a huge component now of our workforce. So what do you see? How does that happening or not happening change things for you in your idea of how to reimagine work?
Yeah. So first of all, just to say, with both of you, I think it's incredibly terrifying. You know, you also look at even the use of AI. Everyone just jumps again mindlessly onto AI. Sure, it's got benefits, but does everybody know that, you know, in Kenya, these workers are getting like less than $1 a day to basically feed the AI, right? There's all this complexity that sits behind these systems that no one really thinks about. And I think that's part of my answer to the question is I think we've got to slow down. Believe it or not, it's an act of resistance to the current system. It's a radical idea to go slow, not fast. And I think, again, it's all going to come back to our own, in the end, I have a mantra, which is change is an inside job. And because I've gone on that journey, I stay on that journey now. You know, no one can actually, apart from throwing you in prison, no one can actually tell any one of us on this call right now to do anything. Not really. We allow other people to tell us to do things. Now, it's not always easy because you've got a salary and you've got bills to pay. But again, that trying to remember, that's why I link reimagining and remembering so closely together. You know, this stuff is innate. This isn't stuff we need to buy off of a shelf or buy online from that gig worker, right? Like there's so much wisdom already within us when we're born. Yet so little of that wisdom comes through after we've gone through that education system we spoke about into the world of work, right? We've been dumbed down. So I think, you know, I think we've got to actually resist. And I use the word resistance intentionally. We've got to resist certain aspects of technology being allowed to become normal, quote unquote, because you're absolutely right. You know, surveillance tech, we've seen it already. We're seeing it with AI. You know, we are becoming more and more dehumanized. Tech for this purpose is great. Tech's a tool, right? You can use it for good things, use it for bad things. But at the end of the day, the power within tech, like money in financial services, sits in far too few hands, like big corporations, like big banks. And that's what's got to change. That's what we've got to reimagine, is what does a more distributed, decentralized system look like for currency, decentralized system for power with workplaces. None of this is new to a lot of your listeners, but our role within that might be quite new. So rather than waiting for someone else to do it, what are we going to do individually and collectively to retake that power back so that we can do something better with it?
But first, we have to recognize the systems that we're in.
Exactly.
Because the fiat system, as we call it, has been very good, very, very good at corrupting anything that goes against it. So climate change,
Let's turn it into a metric around CO2.
Yeah, no, and we're planting 1,000 trees in Jamaica or whatever, Brazil, and it's the same 1,000 trees that is sold to everybody. So there's greenwashing. There's when we talk about discrimination against women, misogyny in general, we bring out the 3 women that are in the 3 wars, and hey, they're very successful financially, and but they're not. They're guys with women's clothes on, basically. So yeah, the system is very adept at defending itself, but it doesn't change anything. It just makes it worse and worse. And what I call division, you call individualization or something. But it's the same thing. Is if we can't remember the Matrix, and they were all in their little pods with wires sticking out of them. That's the direction that we're going. And of everybody, you know, I'm my own person, and this and that, and gig workers, it scares shit out of me. Excuse my French, because it's the you don't have anybody to hang out with except, you know, whoever your friends are, and you cannot take any action. So the action you were talking about that we can take right now, we can take it and motivate other people to take it and stuff like that. But we have 10 years, Great said. He's been pretty good at knowing where the direction is going, and he's been very good at getting it wrong. Well, it's not wrong for him. because he's made a lot of money out of that. But insisting on the same system, the same process. And to be fair to him, that's probably all he knows. That's probably all he knows.
That's the world we live in here, especially in the Valley, right?
That's the world we live in. It's been very progressive. You know, he's giving us medicine. I'm carrying a cancer bag or something. I don't know what they call this. It's a pump. So technology is advancing very quickly. And if you have insurance, and if you have this, and if you have that, the other people, they have to go to the Valley or somewhere out of here to get the same kind of healthcare. I go 10 minutes on the street. So he's been very good at predicting where that system is going to go. So I would take his word that, yeah, gig workers, they figure out what their value is to the system, and they're going to exploit it. And
I just got a text message from my cousin to ask what the hell's wrong with us, all three bald guys. So
I'm not
we need a new
bald,
system.
but I got
We need a
hair.
new system.
But that leads me to a really good question. Well, I think it's a good question. You tell me, Garry. Do you think, I mean, those of us, you said you've been at this for a decade,
Yeah.
doing the inner work. I'd say probably about the same for myself. Really, it's going to be the young people that are going to need to do this.
Yes.
If things are going to really change, it's going to be them, because we're leaving the industry as they're about to enter, or they're just now entering. Have you worked with the new generations that are entering the workforce? And what's your sense of how willing and able they are to take on this responsibility?
Oh, it is a great question, Jose, because yes, I do have interactions with a subset of, and again, bear in mind my context is within a quite traditional industry most of the time, but I do obviously have a network outside. I would summarize it, my perspective only, is that there's a real mix. There's a real mix of, I've never seen such an activist cohort, people willing to speak up, challenge the status quo, say, actually, no, you want me in the office 5 days a week? Who the hell do you think you are? Like, there's definitely a lot more pushback coming from a subset, but equally,
go brought that on.
yeah, and also equally, there's a subset that are being indoctrinated in the new ways. So it's a little bit like what we saw with the unrest here in the UK. You know, depending on the level of investment, depending on the level of education, who you surround yourself with, I see the next. Don't like to say it, but I see the next systemic iteration of this psychological war is going to be with that generation, to be honest, those that absolutely are driving change. And then those that have been conditioned, you know, they've been handed down the house, the inheritance, whereas so many others have literally they couldn't even, you know, barely got a pot to eat out of. So I think it's a very interesting time for us, because I can't remember a time in my recent history, maybe you guys can add into this, where we've seen such a wide gap between the haves and have-nots. There's always been a gap, always.
Yes.
But the extraction of wealth, for example, in the UK alone, the food bank usage of the last decade has gone through the roof, the exponential curve we don't want to see. And at the same time, more and more money's leaving the working classes to the super rich. Just look at the number of billionaires on the planet. So every metric reinforces what I just said. So I just wrap up my response to your question, Jose, by saying there's a lot of potential in this cohort, the new generation coming in. I think there's a responsibility on us to help reduce harm as best we can whilst they take over. And I don't see that happening enough, to be honest, is that conscious awareness and, right, what can we do differently as we hand over the baton?
And what does that look like? What do you see as the thing that we could do?
The number one biggest topic is mindset. So what I mean by that is organizational and individual mindset. So I imagine back to the theme today, I imagine, and I am actively working on this, is reaching out to and trying to engage the CEOs, the CHROs, the CFOs of the biggest, most harmful companies on the planet, trying to build relations. Because relationality, as you both know, as we all know, nothing changes without relationality. It's not an individual pursuit, it's a collective pursuit. And it took me a really long time to work that out, to be completely honest and vulnerable. I thought I had to do it all myself, which is why it took so bloody long. And then once I realized it was actually a collective pursuit, things accelerated for me. So that's how I see us being able to, our sort of older cohort, shall we say, is how do we come together to share perspective? You know, we're generally more financially well off. We're generally got less risk, inverted commas, compared to those younger generations. And I think we should use that privilege to try and have the conversations we haven't had as much over the last decade or two.
So how would you imagine that happening? Should we form a company, a bigger company that's international, all that shit, or should we offer classes, or how could we go about that?
Well, I see this as part of that journey, right? That we've met each other tonight. You know, you're having all these other amazing guests on. So there's this informal network already forming, right? As people get to know each other, they know what their skills are, what they're working on. And I see it being a much more organic process where the more of us that know each other and the more that understand each other's drivers, I then say, actually, when I go into a chemical company in 6 months' time, I don't really, actually, you want to work on X? Let me introduce you to Matt and Jose. I actually think what they're working on could be really helpful. So there's going to be a Trojan horse of a business need. That's we're still in the old world, right? So it's got to be okay, what's the ROI, etc. So we've got to find a way to speak to them. But the ability through this informal network to bring in transformational change, that's where I see it being different. It's not going to be me going in as just Garry going, hey, I think you should change X. It's going to be, hey, I want to connect you to these people because I want you to have a relationship with them like you've got with me. We're not blaming you. We're not telling you that you're a bad person. But we now do realize how mucked up things are. So what do we want to do? And that we gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how I see it.
Do you see larger organizations being able to change?
I'll let you know after Monday when I meet the CEO, because this is a really hot topic, genuinely. Of course, organizations are people, right? So at the end of the day, do senior leaders that have a lot of power, often unearned, just because of status or Peter Principle or whatever, I think people are prepared to change, senior leaders. But I think part of what I just described, people are we've been told we have to do it on our own, right? Divide and conquer, as you both said earlier. I empathize with a lot of these leaders. They might be on a load of money, but I guarantee you both, they're absolutely lonely. I can be absolutely categorically clear. Those people, most of them will be lonely. Yeah. So in a sort of funny way, I wouldn't normally say this. I think they need to feel loved. They need to feel part of something. They need to feel, be in an environment where they can actually feel into their body and know someone's not going to try and take the job off them or going to try and undercut them or stab them in the back. Because that is the old world, right? That's the old fiat world you both spoke about. So it's wholly possible. And it's literally can be clicked at a flick of a switch, depending on relationality. Absolutely convinced.
I'm looking at Matt's face, and I'm not seeing his convince there.
I'm not convinced that it'd be like that, but I'm convinced that they also feel the loneliness and the problems, and sometimes, I mean, speaking for my own self, at one point we had to lay off a lot of people from a company, a big company that disappeared, and I was trying to explain in words that others could understand why we should allow more time or finding jobs. And this guy turned to me and said, "But that's not your problem." And at first I was shocked for about 2 seconds, and then I said, "Yeah, that's not my problem," because it was in the middle of the system. And so you feel the need, you feel the change, you feel all the stuff, but you're not willing to put your livelihood at risk. You're not willing to put your kids' private school. I know it's different. You can hear, but private school is one you pay money for, and you're not willing to risk all that. You suppress that in order for the money to keep flowing. So, and this is my own experience. So I don't know. Maybe I'm out in the I'm out of the loop somewhere. I'm
No,
there, but I don't think so.
no,
I
you're
think a
not.
lot of people are going around suppressing their emotions in exchange for the money. So we're slaves to the monetary system.
And this is why I asked the question, Gary, because my sense is, as much as we can change a CEO's mind, not we can change it, but that he's primed for it or she's primed for it, and given the opportunity with relationality, as you said, being able to have that sense of comfort, like there's people around me that are going to allow me to act on these feelings that I have, and to do those things. Then you've got the board, then you've got the investors, then you've got the market, then you've got actual employees that are like, no, just don't change anything, just pay me, because you muck this up, my 10-year, 15, 20-year career is going to get upended. Like, there is so much momentum in the system that any one small group of individuals trying to make changes to the system, I can't see that happening. I can't see that happening at a sufficient scale to do what needs to happen.
I think it's an absolutely fair challenge. And I'm not in utopia. I don't disagree with iReview from that context. We are in Western collapse, back to where we started. Like, we can't turn this around. We're not going to stop. We can't put the handbrake on to then introduce something new. There's going to be something come from the embers, whatever's left.
Oh.
However, I will add, you both know Garry Ridgewell, I'm sure, ex-CEO of WD-40.
Yeah.
There's a great story when I first met him, Jose, over in San Diego back in 2018. I asked him a very similar question, so linked to what you just asserted.
Right.
I was like, Garry, how do you keep the investors at bay? You've got this great, you've got this great culture, high engagement. People love the company, but you're still part of the old system. Yeah, you've still got short-termist investors. And he shared with me that moment, Jose, and it's something that any CEO can do, and that's why I do that tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
They can. Any CEO can do what I'm about to share because Garry did it. Any CEO can turn around, and Garry Ridge did this and said, "We appreciate any investment. Thank you very much for considering WD-40. But if you are looking for a quick return, we are not the company for you." And he delivered consistent results over 20 years, high engagement, etc. And he managed the markets up. He managed the system. Not enough CEOs, I would assert, are prepared to have that difficult conversation. And that is why I go clip, because that's one conversation that any of these guys and girls with power could do to try and tip the system in a slightly different direction.
Is he still there?
No, not anymore. No, he's handed over now.
Right. And is the attitude the same at that organization?
I believe it is. I actually had dinner with Garry a couple of weeks ago in London. So I believe the ethos is still very much the same.
Because that's one thing that we've noticed is, when Matt was working at the organization that he co-founded, much of what you've just described existed within the organization. But it got acquired, and poof, that ethos no longer exists. And we see that in so many organizations that have had a leader or leaders that were trying to make these changes, but they only remain within the power of those individuals and not as a systemic change.
Right. As soon as it leaves the stage, it most likely changes. What's his name? The Reinventing Organizations.
Oh yeah, Lalou.
Lalou.
Yeah.
So Lalou wrote about 12 companies or something, and several of them, I don't want to say most of them because I don't know, but several of them have gone back to being fiat on the basis that the CEO who made the change retired. In one case, the CEO died. His son, which is sort of had this thing in his head, said, "Oh, what's this? No managers? That's illegal or something." And he changed it all back to fiat kind of company where you report to this guy and this guy reports to me, and I get the final light to me, and I'm happy. So yeah, I was sort of reinforcing what I said that's a change in the fiat system. That's why I say we don't want to change the fiat system. Fiat system is fine.
Another F word, yes, okay.
Yeah, and no, but it's fine in its own. It's advancing. My thing is, look, they're going to get there. Until I heard this thing about the gig work, they're going to get there one way or the other because humanity can't take all that pressure, all that responsibility, all that pressure, not responsibility. But but yeah, if you do it in the fiat system, the moment the leader leaves the stage, then it goes back to whatever. It may stay the same, very unlikely. It may go back to the way it was, very likely.
I just want to point out that we're at 42 minutes. I didn't, it's gone so quickly, I didn't realize it's been that long. Garry, did you want to add anything else to our conversation?
I just want to say thank you both, and also to Carlos as well. I think it's really nourishing and also not just theoretical, which is what I appreciate. We're really pushing and prodding at the system and what can we physically do. I think that's what's really important because quite often this can get quite lofty and lost in theory, but I think we've been pretty practical today. The last thing I want to leave you with is one more experiment I'm running at the moment, very much in the spirit of what you both discussed. So I've not mentioned this on any public platform, and I'm not going to mention any company name because I wouldn't do that. But I'm literally in the process of trying to help an organization merge as an equal, not a regular M&A that gets gobbled up and then basically people get laid off, etc. But there's a very progressive company within the extractive industries that wants to positively infect the big system. And they're proven to be very generative. They make good money. The way the organization works is very progressive. And my role is to try and find a suitor, and they would stay as separate companies. But in essence, it would be like this big one is investing in the small one to learn from it, to understand how it operates more democratically, with decentralization of power, etc. But keeping them almost as partners and not being absorbed fully into, I think, is also part of this. When I think about the planets, being in the orbit of one another is enough. We don't have to be part of and exactly the same as another company all the time. Right. So this is a quite fun experiment I'm in the middle of at the moment, is trying to work out, how can we actually test and poke at this system that you say is very much, Matt, as you say, still very much fiat led, but how can we try and do some side and bottom up influencing of the big system by running some of these experiments? So that's a very live topic at the moment.
So not to discourage you, but the company that we sold to, we had a company called Nearsoft, and we sold it to another company. And that's where got this whole thing started in my head, is why am I getting so much money? I didn't do anything. I mean, I didn't do anything, any growth related things. So we sold it. It got absorbed. The old people, the people that we dealt with, said actually came to Mexico, and I'm not in Mexico. I'm in California, but this was Mexico at one point, and they went to Mexico and all that stuff, and then for their own reasons they disappeared. They left the stage, and the new guy come from HCL. HCL had a good story to tell, but it wasn't self-organizing or anything. And now it's no more. They said, well, you're part of the system. That's it. We don't want to have a system on the side. And I'm having lunch with the CEO of the old Nearsoft in a few minutes. In fact, I'm going to be late. And I'm going to ask him point blank, he said, we have to talk. And I don't know if he can fire me because I've retired. But we're friends. We're good friends. And we'll see what's going on. Maybe nothing. But at one point, they'll tell him this or else. And that's the way it goes. Unless there's a contract in the fiat world, there's such a thing as a contract, so you leave us alone, and you'll you can suck things that way, but not this way. For something, I don't know. So
well, good luck with that, Garry.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I didn't want to say some of that like, well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
No, it's genuine. I mean, in my opinion, there are a lot of things that need to happen. It's not just going to be one thing, right? It's going to be everything, right? And the more bottom up happens, the more top down is going to be possible, and the more middle up and middle down is possible, and that's everything gives somebody else a permission.
Oh,
right.
Nice.
Every little piece of whatever we do. And so the more anyone can do, whatever that little bit is, that can give somebody else adjacently the permission to do their thing. So
I haven't gotten an announcement from Carlos.
I'm not sure that we have anyone booked for next week yet. So maybe.
So we have nobody booked for next week, and that's what Carlos is not saying anything. Anyways, so this has been more than I expected, to be honest, and not because of 3 volt ads, but it's been very useful because, so say it's going to take 1,000 experiments before anything comes up as this is more successful, this is next successful, and I hope that it never becomes one. It stays decentralized, and so what I'd like to do, as your experiments and all that stuff, is have you back at some point, and and then ask you how they go.
Yeah, more than welcome. Happy to share.
So we'll be in contact again.
And I think for what's upcoming, we've got the URL there on the bottom of radicalworld.live/p/upcoming-1/ Carlos, we need to make that a little harder because that's a little too simple at the moment.
Yes. -1 or -1 or something.
Awesome.
But anyways, what I'll say is trying to say is there's your calendar, and you can go and look in the calendar to see what's coming next. With that, we do our goodbyes kind of thing. And no, you got to keep it
Our
straight.
royal goodbyes, yes.
You got to keep it straight. And here's the Cuban telling the guy from the UK how to do it. Anyways,
Thank you, Gary. It was a pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone.